The following is a summary of our experience over the last 18 months with Aledo ISD, specifically with Superintendent Susan Bone and Director of Special Education Margaret Bloodworth. 5 years ago this week, our family moved to Aledo, Texas, March 2020. The primary reason for our move was to be in this school district. 1 month later, we would find out that the baby I was pregnant with, our daughter Annie, would have Down syndrome. One of our initial thoughts was, thank God we moved. Aledo had a reputation for not only a great school system, but the best in special education. In the state of Texas, children with developmental delays and disabilities have access to a program called ECI, Early Childhood Intervention, where they can receive all of their therapies like speech, OT, PT from birth until their 3rd birthday. Once turning 3, they then transfer to get services from their local school district. Annie's evaluation. September 17th, 2023, Annie turned 3, and I began the process of getting her set up with Aledo ISD. I was not going into this blindly. I was well educated and well informed and ready to advocate for Annie like I had since she was born. That summer 2023, just months before, a dear friend of mine, Katie Rivera, had begun the same process for her son, Cal, who was 3.5 years old. They had just moved here from Iowa. Katie was shocked to find that the district wanted to completely redo Cal's evaluation. They wanted to add another label, intellectual disability, ID, and give him an IQ test, even though he had already qualified for special education services. Cal went for months without therapy while she battled the district. Because of our tight network of families, I watched everything unfold. It got to the point that the school sent the Riveras a prior written notice. This is a document that means that your child has been denied, saying it was the law that kids have to be IQ tested. Katie had to hire a lawyer we found together out of Dallas. Ultimately, the district conceded and approved Cal without the IQ test. My initial conversation with Aledo was with the diagnostician. Diagnosticians assess students for learning disabilities and developmental delays using standardized evaluations to identify academic and behavioral needs. They collaborate with educators, parents, and specialists to develop effective interventions and ensure that students receive appropriate support. Hold on to those key words, collaborate and appropriate. Because of the many nightmare stories I had heard about schools not being honest with parents in this process, I took an audio recording of my phone call that day with diagnostician Jennifer Williams. I wanted it on record what had been said, so I didn't forget, and I also wanted to be able to share it with my husband. I never could have imagined that it would be used as evidence in a trial. The conversation went incredibly well with Mrs. Williams. She was a lovely person to work with, very kind, very positive, very patient with all of my questions. When a student is evaluated to receive special education, there are various categories they can qualify under. I knew Annie qualified under speech delay and OHI, which means other health impairment. Annie had open heart surgery as an infant and has overcome many other medical battles. It was Aledo's obsession with the IQ test that was going to be in question for me. I had told her that I was not in denial that Annie has an intellectual disability, but everything I'd heard from parents and their experiences is how the IQ testing and the scores were later weaponized against students for their placement, which is where and how they will learn. I did not want that for Annie. What that means is, and what I would find out a few months later, is that the school district auto-feeds children with IQ scores under 70 into the FA classroom. FA stands for Functional Academics, when determining placement, which is the completely segregated class for special education and the most restrictive environment. Our goal for Annie, especially when she entered kindergarten down the road, was for her to be included with her typical peers in the regular classroom as much as possible. She's a very bright little girl and deserves every opportunity to be pushed and challenged. I was not against all forms of cognitive testing, I just did not want the IQ test for Annie. I found it antiquated and of no use to better educate her. My other huge concern was that Annie could not even take the test. Upon studying how the test works, my then 5-year-old, who's our typical son, who was in kindergarten at Aledo, he would barely be able to take the test himself. Questions are asked verbally, and answers are to be given verbally. Annie has a speech delay. I wasn't even sure how she would get a score. I was delighted to hear from Miss Williams that in her professional opinion, quote, those IQ tests would not be appropriate for Annie at barely 3 years old. For our little biddies, I like to use the DAISY test, which is a play-based cognitive test to see what Annie knows. That was exactly what I wanted for Annie. I was elated. I hung up and thought, wow, we're not going to have to fight this after all. Wonderful. 2 weeks later, October 9th, I got the consent for evaluation document to sign, and upon studying it, sure enough, the IQ tests were listed after all. I called Jennifer Williams right away and said, this is not what we agreed to. What happened? She told me that it was just standard to have these IQ tests listed, but that she would talk to her boss and get back to me. 2 days later, on October 11th, Katie Rivera and I met with both Aledo ISD assistant superintendents, Saxton and Raymond. We expressed our concerns about our shared struggle with this evaluation process for Cal and Annie. We also shared our bigger concern for the Director of Special Education, Margaret Bloodworth, who was ultimately making these decisions. Even more so, upon looking into her employment history, we learned that she had come from Southlake ISD, where the entire special education program was under a federal investigation with multiple OCRs filed. That's the Office of Civil Rights complaints. We had also just talked firsthand with some of these parents. We were dismissed and told Dr. Bone would not hire her unless she was well suited for the job, and we will not allow a witch hunt. There was never any follow-up. Weeks continued to go by for Annie with no updates as promised. On October 31st, 2023, I called again. Miss Williams seemed very anxious and stressed. It was then that I could tell she was stuck in the middle and getting orders from Director Bloodworth. Bloodworth still had not talked to me once or called me back. She told me, go ahead and just sign it as it is, and maybe I'll do the IQ test, maybe I won't. I was stunned. I told her, Miss Williams, I do not sign contracts that I do not agree with. I went ahead and I did email over the contract to sign, but I crossed through the line that listed the IQ tests. The next thing that happened was a phone call with the Assistant Superintendent Saxton. She insisted that we give full consent, restating over and over that it was the law. I know that this was a move to pressure us. Still, not once had the director ever spoken to us. At this time, we had our lawyer send over a letter to the district explaining that parents have a right to have an opinion in what evaluations their child are given, and that we were in no way breaking the law. It was the same letter that was sent in the same scenario for Cal, only this time they said no, and they sent Annie a prior written notice for not agreeing to the IQ testing, and they dismissed her from the district. This inconsistent response to the same letter from one child to the next is proof that they were only afraid of one thing: parents coming together to speak up, to be fully informed and have a say, and no matter the issue at hand, they wanted to maintain complete control. At this point, we met again with our lawyer to learn what options we had next. Due process preparation. It was then that we learned about the TEA due process. In Texas education, due process refers to a formal adversarial legal process similar to a trial used to resolve disputes between parents and school districts, particularly regarding special education. In this separate court from the typical judicial system, and one that historically sides with the school districts, the judges or hearing officers are not appointed or elected officials. They are paid employees of the state. Despite being told by our lawyer it was an inherently biased system, we felt strongly about our rights to participate in our child's education, and we moved forward with this due process hearing. In only 2% of these cases do families prevail and win their cases for their child. Before the trial, motions were filed back and forth and documents prepped for evidence. One day I opened an email forwarded from our lawyer letting us know that the district had made motion to subpoena and wanted the following. Every conversation I had ever had with any other Aledo ISD parents in form of text message, email, social media message, voicemail, written, etc. Every conversation I'd had in the last year with my husband. Access to the app that we used to communicate with the teachers at Annie's preschool she was attending at the time. A copy of the amniocentesis that was taken when I was pregnant to prove that Annie had trisomy 21 Down syndrome. They wanted every medical record and therapy record from Annie's entire 3 years. Their tactic to induce extreme stress worked great. Well done, Aledo ISD and legal team. You have further beat down another disability family. I was not stressed by what producing any of these documents would reveal. I was stressed at how one would even go about collecting all of that. What in the world did speaking with another parent have to do with Annie's case? Nothing. It was a total scare tactic and threat to stop befriending and working together with other families. Conversations with my own husband, the app with Annie's preschool teacher. Have it. Maybe you could learn what a healthy teacher-parent relationship looks like. I know that the real reason for that was to try to find evidence of me being a difficult or negligent parent. Proof that Annie had Down syndrome? Every medical record ever? That would take me months, and it's absurd. We were relieved to learn that just about all of it was rejected by the hearing officer as irrelevant. It just added hours to our legal bill for our lawyer to take care of. Again, congratulations, Aledo. You have made a family of a child with a disability spend financial resources on a fight that never should have been. Our lawyer told us it was not totally uncommon to see a school district do something like this. However, Aledo was the most egregious he had ever seen in his career. It was becoming more and more clear that my concerns for Annie were well beyond just the IQ test. The character of this superintendent and the director of special education were beyond worrisome. The trial. The trial was held early February 2024 before the hearing officer. It was a miserable experience to have to go through. Our lawyer did such a fantastic job providing evidence as to why these IQ tests were not appropriate or reliable for a 3-year-old with a speech delay to take. We couldn't have felt better about how it went. The district had multiple employees act as witnesses on the stand, and one of them was diagnostician Jennifer Williams. The audio recording of her personally saying why these tests were unfit for Annie and how the play-based cognitive tests would have been better was played. They had her get on the stand and say that she never said that. It was incredulous. I honestly felt bad for the woman. She was clearly forced to do that. It was complete and obvious perjury. 1 year ago today, March 19th, the verdict came back and the hearing officer sided with Aledo. And we wonder why things never change for the better in special education. This court system must be restructured. The hearing officer ordered that Aledo move forward with Annie's evaluation without our full consent and do whatever testing they wish. They had 90 days to do so. It has been almost a year and we have not heard from them. We're not sure what violating these orders means, but it can't be good. Not a single person in that trial had ever met my child. Not the diagnostician, not the superintendent, not their lawyers, certainly not the director of special education. And yet they were granted full power to use whatever means they wanted to determine her future. I know my daughter best. I have spent thousands of hours physically working with her in therapy, learning how to eat, how to crawl, how to walk, hundreds of days in hospitals, watching her fight for her life. She is a miracle. It's a miracle that we have our daughter. And now her precious development in future education is being completely hindered. They have already taken 18 months away from her, and I refuse to let them take more. We also decided during this time that we could not, in good conscience, continue to send our 6-year-old son to an Aledo school because of the history of retaliation the special education director has had against parents who challenge her. So he is now in 1st grade at a Montessori school. A few months later, we decided that we were not done. There had never been a case exactly like ours taken to trial. There was no solid law that focuses on not only IQ testing, but parents having a collaborative opinion for which tests are suitable for their child at the evaluation level. We wanted to set a precedence. Ironically, in the due process TEA hearing, Margaret Bloodworth, the director of special education, made comment, "We cannot let families do this, have this power in decision making. It will set a precedent." While she used the wrong word, the sentiment is alarming. They openly admitted that if they backed down on Annie's case, then other families would hear about it and want to do the same. Our lawyer and I were dumbfounded. In fact, the IDEA mandates meaningful parent participation in all stages of special education. These people were openly admitting to their game plan that is in opposition to the law. Annie's case was presented to one of the top law firms in the country, and after a long process, they agreed to take it on pro bono and appeal it at the federal level. The district was served in June of 2024, and the first motion was filed Halloween 2024. The way it has worked is each side has made their legal arguments in written form back and forth over and over, and the final round ended in January. We are now awaiting the judge's decision. It could be any day or it could be months from now. Annie's case is public, and I encourage anyone who wants to look into it to do so. Our little girl clearly qualifies to receive special education. The fact that this superintendent would rather put this much time and money into fighting our family rather than working alongside us as a team for the ultimate benefit of our child is frightening. This started as a disagreement over IQ testing and our rights as Annie's parents. But what was revealed along the way, exposing the motives and the priorities of this leadership, is a much larger concern. We have now connected with countless families who have been treated the same way and worse. In fact, these testimonies are only a few of the many out there. The majority are terrified to come forward. It's time to inform our community. There must be accountability. This little piggy went to market.
Faster.
This little piggy went to town. This little piggy had roast beef, and this little piggy had none. And this little piggy went wee 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 all the way home. We give you a hug. I love you.